Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Fulbright Affinity Groups webinar for Fulbright Awards 2021 here at the US-UK Fulbright Commission. My name is Sam Thompson. I am a program manager for the UK Scholar Awards, and throughout the day I've been joined by representatives of the different Fulbright Affinity Groups or different causes and backgrounds to talk about their experiences on the Fulbright program to help applicants or potential applicants this year learn a little bit more about the US and about university in the US and about different people's experiences, so they might be able to think about that in terms of making decisions about their Fulbright and their application. And for this last session today, I'm being joined by Reiss and Lara Ehrenhofer from Fulbright Prism. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes. Thank you for sticking with me through the break there. Just a little bit of housekeeping if this is the first session you're joining us for today. We're recording all of our sessions, so if there's anything interesting that you want to go back to, you'll be able to do that. Or if you've missed the session that you think is relevant to you, you'll be able to find that as well on a later, at a later date online. We are taking questions in our Q&A box. So instead of the chat, please use the Q&A tool if you're going to ask any questions. It allows myself or my colleagues to check the questions a little bit easier and see which ones we've answered and so on. And finally, we are using closed captioning. So if you would like to or require closed captioning, you can turn that on at the bottom of your Zoom UI. There's a little button for closed captioning. You can click that and you can adjust the settings so they are as you require them to be. So thank you for sticking with me through all of that. I'll hand over to Alex and Lara to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about Fulbright Prism. If I start with Alex, just because you're at the top of my screen, and then we'll hear from Lara just after. So if you'd like to talk a little bit about your Fulbright experience and then what Fulbright Prism is and your role within it, that would be great.
Hi, sure thing. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Alex Reiss. I use he, him pronouns. I am an alumni of the UK-US Fulbright program. I undertook my Fulbright graduate program at New York University. I studied magazine writing there, and I currently work as a news editor at Time magazine. Fulbright Prism is a really, really awesome organization that I'm thrilled to be a part of. It is all about centering and uplifting the experiences of LGBTQ Fulbrighters as they undertake Fulbright programs, and afterwards, as you know, we work to grow a network. I will actually segue to Lara there because I feel like that's a very good point to jump off in terms of an exciting thing we have coming up soon. But that's a bit of an intro for us, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. That was a really lovely sort of wrap up of what Fulbright Prism does. My name is Lara Ehrenhofer. I am also an alumna of the US-UK Fulbright program. I did my Fulbright grant in the US in 2013, which I'm realizing is really quite a while ago by now. I did my PhD in the US, so I was there for 5 years at the University of Maryland, right outside of Washington, DC. And now I live in Berlin, Germany, where I am building a voice assistant for a car product. And my role at Fulbright Prism is I'm the fundraising coordinator, and the exciting event that Alex was just alluding to is that we are hosting our first ever virtual conference. It's actually next week, and I'm going to drop the registration link in the chat right there. So if you're interested, you can join us. We basically noticed that the experiences of queer Fulbrighters weren't really covered in the orientation that we got prior to going out. It can also be really a big thing to be in a different country, whether you're going to the US from outside or going from the US to a different country across the world, to sort of understand what it's like to be queer in a different environment. And that's why we started the conference, to showcase the experiences of people from the community, foster an environment for exchange, to network, to tell stories, and to sort of get a little bit of ground under our feet for those people who are only just launching into their year right now.
That sounds great. That sounds really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to join you here, and please also join our conference if you're interested.
Great. So that's link is in the chat for anyone who is interested. And I suppose while we're putting links in the chat and talking about ways that people can find Fulbright Prism, what platforms are you on, and how can people find you on those platforms? I'm pretty sure I follow Fulbright Prism on Instagram, but I think there's a website as well that people should be able to find. Is that right?
Yes, so I just put the URL in the chat as well. That's right, we have Instagram. Those are our two #1 main channels, but we also have Twitter and I believe Reddit as well.
Great, thank you. So this event today is really aimed at applicants and applicants from the UK. And I suppose you've both experienced spending a lot of time in the US and on different campuses. Did you find that there was a lot of support and access to communities of other queer students while you were in the US, or was it a little bit harder to find than, say, on a campus here in the UK or elsewhere in the world?
I can jump in. My experience is maybe a slightly unique one. My undergrad was in London at a university that didn't really have a campus, and my grad program was in New York City at New York University, which had a little bit more of a campus, but not like a traditional American campus experience. So I would say that the access to community groups, to spend time with your queer peers, and to involve yourself in that way was available. But you would have to find it. Like, it would have to be something that you would be a little bit proactive about. It was certainly there, it was certainly well supported, and it was certainly, a structural part of the, if not a campus environment, but the collegiate environment. But I would say for schools in larger cities that don't have the traditional way you think of an American campus, there's probably a little bit more work to do in terms of seeking out that community, but it's definitely available.
And I guess actually the experience of being in College Park at University of Maryland, that's a huge campus, but not in the middle of a city as such. So I suppose you've got a different perspective on things there.
Yeah, so that's one aspect of my experience that's a bit different. So the University of Maryland at College Park is one of the largest public universities, actually largest universities in the United States. So it has 30,000 undergrads and I think 11,000 grad students last time I checked, which is larger than some cities, and it just means that there is, as in many universities in the US, there's really a big focus on sort of channeling people's interests and needs. And especially when there's such a large student body, there's just a lot of places to find support. I personally also, so the campus is in a suburb of Washington, DC, and I found myself plugging into support networks in the city. So for instance, there was an LGBTQ community center where I got a lot of mental health support in my time there. And in general, I found that being so close to a large liberal city meant that I really was privileged to not have to worry about anything while I was there. Things were very different in the UK, not because of any backlash or whatever, but simply because I didn't come out until I was in the US. So my experience of being in the UK was I was in Oxford, which is also a very decentralized, non-campusy sort of environment. But also, I can't really compare to what it's like in the UK to be a queer person, because at the time I kind of didn't realize I was one. So that was a whole different level of kind of journey to go on, being in a foreign country and sort of navigating that by myself.
Would you say that there are particularly big difficulties settling in the US in terms of finding a community on campus, but also just regular culture shock and navigating that experience of being in a new country? Would you say the US is particularly difficult to settle in, or did you find that for you it was a pretty quick process of navigating that? If we start with Lara this time, and then.
Yeah, thanks for calling on me so we avoid the awkward balance. So put it this way, I had lived in the United States as a child because my mum had a job there for a while, and we all went. And I was completely naive about what it means to move. And the thing is that, sure, some of it is culture shock. Between the US and the UK, there's really a lot of commonality. You're not going to have trouble understanding American English for the most part. People think you sound adorable and will ask you if you know the Queen personally all the time. People in general, in my experience, are open, friendly, love to meet strangers. But I found it a little bit more challenging to make genuine, deep connections and friendships. In part, that was because of the culture shock of suddenly living in a suburb, which I'd never done before. And even in a suburb of Washington, DC, I found public transport to be spotty, unreliable, expensive, and just a general pain in the neck. So I ended up having to sort of navigate, well, how can I have a social life when it's so difficult to get around, which problem I fixed by buying a car 2 years in. But in general, I think, yeah, I guess what I would say is I underestimated culture shock going in. I would say that there are some really big differences, things like people are friendly in a way that we wouldn't expect in the UK, in ways that are really, really nice. But also it kind of masks a sense of, I felt it was a little bit harder to make deeper connections. And just underestimating that on my way there, I think caused me some issues, which isn't to say that it was all doom and gloom. It's just that uprooting your entire life, and especially I knew going there that I was going to be there for exactly 5 years, which is not a short amount of time, but also not really a long amount of time either. So yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, I resonated with so much of what Lara was saying there. For me, it was not a culture shock until it was. You know, American culture, I feel like, has become so universally mainstream that everything can make sense until all of a sudden you drop a turn of phrase that is a British way of speaking, or you interact with somebody in that sort of a context, and Americans have no filter, and they assume that if they don't understand it, you are in the wrong, or that you are the you are in the wrong. So that was challenging to navigate. I mean, that is still, I live in the States presently, that is still challenging to navigate, in the sense that these moments will pop up unexpectedly and throw you for a loop. So that definitely, I also definitely agreed a lot with what Lara was saying in terms of, I do think the way that the collegiate culture in America is either very surface level in terms of the community and the friendships to build, or it's very, very deep. And there isn't a lot of middle ground. I actually found I did make a ton of really good friends in my grad school program. For me, that was because my undergrad in the UK was at art school and my graduate program was in journalism. So it was a very different course program, way of studying. And I found the graduate school experience certainly a lot more time consuming, a lot more taxing. And I think that fostered a community in and of itself that I found really valuable. That was also sort of a culture shock in itself, just the way that schooling is at the collegiate level is very, very different in the US than was my experience in the UK. And actually that was something I found myself grappling with as much as anything in a larger cultural sense. Yes, Americans will never not surprise you, is the way I look at it now. You will think you are totally on the level with somebody and then you're snapped right out of it. Yeah.
We have a question from our chat that I think I want to reword a little bit and change the focus on a little bit. So they've asked, is sexuality something you disclosed on your Fulbright application? And I think perhaps a better way to look at this for you both is reflecting on the application process. Is there an angle with which you would talk about the queer experience in your application process, or is that something that you think you would rather wait until thinking about orientation and the move over to America to bring into that experience? How would you go about thinking about the application process, reflecting on it from where you are now? I guess if we start with Alex, we'll just alternate who's starting each time, so we avoid being too polite. And
yeah, I'm happy to speak to my experience. I was very open with my sexuality in my application process. I had come out mostly in undergrad, and actually one thing I would say is that one thing I loved in particular about my Fulbright experience was the chance to like do over. I got to go into my graduate school experience feeling so much more confident about who I was than I was at undergrad, and like the new place, the new country to do that in was great. But to circle back to the question, at the time I was living in London as an undergraduate student, I was a volunteer at the London Lesbian and Gay Switchboard. And that volunteer work that I was doing was pretty integral to my application in terms that it was like, it was basically some of my primary journalism training in terms of like interviewing people as you are speaking with them on the phone and asking questions to get people to open up to you. So it felt really natural that it would be a part of my application. I would also say that like, I think the Fulbright Association wants to know who you are and they want to know where you're at. And I think, I think as we're seeing with the fact that this is a panel and we're having these discussions, Fulbright wants to meet you where you're at. And so if it is something that you are comfortable, that is a part of you that you think would be relevant to your course of study or the experience you would be having in the US, I would say raise it. But I wouldn't think you need to pigeonhole yourself, is how I would look at it.
Yeah, I really echo that, what Alex just said. I think it's a question of what you're most comfortable with. So I did my PhD research in linguistics and cognitive science. So of course, my entire application was about that and all of the, all of my personal motivation to do that. I did not say anything about LGBT, queer issues or identities at all in my application. But also, as Alex just said, for a lot of people, it makes a lot of sense. It's where you are, why you're making your case to be considered. And if that's part of your motivation that you feel comfortable discussing, there's absolutely a place for doing that. And you don't need to feel pressured, I guess, either way to like, you must disclose this, or you must wave this particular flag in your application at all times. There's no such thing. There's also no such thing as please, by no account, on no account, tell us that you're queer. I find this really kind of ties in with my general experience of sort of navigating what sorts of contexts I'm comfortable disclosing that information about myself in. And that's a discussion that I've been having with myself just in the process of coming out in grad school and also now on the job. I find that it does shift people's perception. That can be a good thing because they stop saying offensive, silly things. It can also be a bad thing because you notice them kind of thinking about all of the terrible things that they've said to you. And that's something that, to be honest, I think is a very personal choice. It's a question of how okay you feel with something that maybe feels a bit raw, or feels raw at some times than at others, or is an ongoing process. In my case, I actually didn't come out to people in my grad school program until like after I left. In some cases with my friends, I told them earlier on. I actually, in the last 6 months where I was kind of just in this horrific dissertation writing tunnel of anxiety, that was also when I did most of my coming out to myself. And I capped off that experience by inviting a load of friends and also friends from grad school, so basically colleagues, to join me at the Pride March as a sort of support posse, which was a really nice way of doing that. But yeah, this is kind of a question of, where you're at on that journey. I think it obviously depends what kind of a campus you're going to go to, whether that's in a more conservative area or a more liberal area. in Washington, DC, I felt completely comfortable talking about this. It was just a question of what my level of comfort was, rather than, you know, is there any sort of danger? Which, no, there wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's worth, as you ending on that note of, is there any sense of danger? It's not something you're going to be penalized for on your application. We're not there combing through applications looking for ways to take things away from them. It's if you feel it's integral to your application, feel free to write about it. But likewise, at the same time, if it's not something that you're comfortable sharing or that you just don't think is relevant equally, I realize what I've just done is repeated things that both Alex and Lara have said, but I felt like perhaps it might be useful to summarize and reiterate some of that. This is a really nice question. And I suppose one that may be changing as we start to move back into more in-person events. Someone attending today has asked, how often does Fulbright Prism meet or have events? And I suppose it's perhaps we could broaden that out to generally what provisions are there for members of Fulbright Prism. So we've had a couple of other representatives from different organizations. They talk about maybe their organization has a book club or film nights or things like that talk to their experience. So what is it that members of Prism can look for in their in the wider Fulbright Prism community? I forgot, I started with Alex last time, so we'll start with Lara this time.
Okay. Yeah, so Fulbright Prism is a global organization, which means that we don't have one, which basically means that before the pandemic, everything was also online. We have events every couple of weeks. They range from, like there's a lot of programming that's around the experiences of people in different parts of the world. So a few months ago, there was an event about with a speaker who had organized the first Pride in Belgrade, in Kosovo. There's also been events with artists, with trans rights activists and sex work activists. We also have a podcast that comes out that is available anytime, and I believe most of our events are recorded. It varies depending on how comfortable the speakers are with that. And they're also on our YouTube channel. So anything that you've missed, you can join. Obviously, the conference is going to be quite a back-to-back bonanza of beautiful, bountiful content, which unfortunately starts with a C rather than a B, but you get what I'm going for. And yeah, I think the conference, we're going to try and make that a recurring event, but this is the first one, so it's a bit of a pilot. And other than that, yeah, I think we have a lot of yeah, online based interaction, which you can join from wherever you are. I also want to put a point in that I forgot to mention earlier, just in the context of settling in and culture shock and kind of how to find your feet. I would really recommend looking out your local chapter of Fulbright Association. So for me, that was a really, really big deal. Washington, DC in particular has a huge community of Fulbright people. So both grantees, like people like me coming in from outside, but also alums. So people who, you know, US citizens who went out and came back because they tend to settle in government style jobs, which there's lots of in DC. So it just meant that there was a really, really large community of like-minded people. And the two big clusters of friends that I made that are really, really close friends are A, people from my grad program, kind of like what Alex described, and B, people from my local Fulbright chapter. And those are friendships and relationships that I really cherish. And that's a great place to get those as well. But returning to Fulbright Prism, we have all of our online events, and you're welcome to look up what's happened in the past or join anything in the future as well.
That was such a perfect summary of what Prism does. I don't need to. Well, the one thing I would just say is to the point about, you know, there being Fulbright chapters, and I completely agree that like meeting with other grantees, meeting with alums in and around where you're at is so important. You know, Fulbright Prism, we want to see Prism chapters in cities. We want, you know, we have Prism chapters around the world. We have Taiwan, we have the West Coast of the US. I'm blanking, you know, we have a bunch, and we want to see that network growing. This almost goes back to the point about, should you feel the need to disclose your sexuality or gender identity on your application? No, but let's be realistic. The world needs more queer leaders in any and all fields. And I think Fulbright Prism is about connecting people to achieve that. So, you know, if you want to be more involved with Fulbright Prism and you are on your Fulbright, let's have you start a chapter and put you in contact with queer alums in your city or your country. And, you know, we want to grow our power, basically.
I guess we're a little bit late starting the session because I was having technical difficulties. So I apologize if we have missed anything, but I suppose, is there anything either of you want to add to round out the discussion we've been having, and perhaps anything maybe you wish you'd known heading into your Fulbright experience that you'd go back and tell yourself if you could, or wish someone had told you before you started?
I think I would say go into it with all of the confidence in the world, because that's another thing Americans do not lack. They do not lack in confidence. And as a Fulbrighter, you are there on a level, if not raised, playing field with your peers at a US institution. So, you know, my Fulbright was a hugely transformative experience professionally. Personally, I met my husband at grad school, so that was great. And I think that, you know, the opportunities it has afforded me, the leaps I've taken forward, you know, perhaps more of my own volition, have been so valuable. And I just think, yeah, you know, go all in if this sounds interesting, because it is absolutely worth it.
Thanks. That's a nice summary. I fully agree with what you said. And I would also add, prepare for this to change your life. I did not meet my husband in grad school, but it has been a really important 5 years of my life, both personally, because, you know, it was a time when I was really challenged. Personally, because of things like, you know, upping sticks and moving across the world by myself. I was in the plane, and as we were sort of touching down in Baltimore, that was when I had the moment of, I don't know a single soul here. Not one person. The closest friend I have geographically is in Boston, which is an 11-hour drive, if you don't run into traffic. It's really a chance for you to be to sort of understand what you yourself are capable of. And I found that, I mean, it was all sorts of things. It was exhilarating, it was frightening, but it also has really it has given me the backbone that I have today. And I would encourage you to really explore all of that and take advantage of those things that are there. You know, travel as much as you can, make friends, say yes to everything. Asterisk, not the dangerous things. But yeah, just grab it with both hands. And I think that the experience is going to change you in a positive way, and allow you to bring something forward that you didn't even realize was there. Which is, yeah.
What a fantastic note to end on. That's so nice. It's been wonderful being joined by both of you today, and I've certainly really enjoyed hearing about your experiences, and I hope our audience did, and I hope they learned a lot, and I hope people catching this on the recording, whichever sessions you've been in, I hope today's been helpful, and I'm sure you'll be able to follow up anything you've heard today with the various organizations that we've signposted in all of the sessions. People have talked about the platform so they can find where you can find more about their organization. Thank you so much, Lara and Alex. It's been really great having you along, and looking forward to the conference. I didn't realize that was coming up, and I would like to go, and I hope other people go along too. And I hope you both have a great rest of the day. I know in Berlin we're past the end of the workday, and in New York you've still got a couple hours left. But I hope you both have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week, and take care. And it's, like I say, been really great having you along. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and let me know if there's any other questions that come up later. You can also find both of our contact details on the fulbrightprism.org website. So go ahead and email us if you have any follow-ups that you'd like to discuss.
Great. Thank you for sharing that as well. And everyone at home, thank you for joining us for today. If you've been here for the whole time, it's been a whole afternoon. So I appreciate you for sticking around. If you've found any of these sessions helpful, you can always let us know, but there is no pressure to. All I can say is if you found these sessions helpful, please go ahead and complete an application, because we would love to hear from you. And that's the best way to make this opportunity happen, is to start an application and just work through it a bit at a time. You can find more support on our website with all of the information there. I believe we've also got a program where you can meet alums going on and ask them questions about their applications too. So be sure to check out our website for any information on that. Thank you all so much for your time today, and have a great rest of the day, and take care. And good luck with your applications. Goodbye.
Bye.